Welcome back to our channel where we uncover the thrilling world of movies. In a world where time is a loop and the future is the past, a mind-bending journey awaits you. Welcome to a quick recap of the sci-fi action film, Looper. Prepare to be taken on a roller coaster ride through time, where the lines between right and wrong blur, and the choices we make shape our destiny. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and leave a like to our channel. Let's begin. In 2044, the United States faces an economic collapse, leading to widespread social decay and a surge in organized crime. Curiously, about 10% of the population exhibits a peculiar mutation, granting them minor telekinetic ability, known as TKs, enabling them to manipulate small objects using their minds. Fast forward to 2074, time travel has been invented but swiftly banned due to its potential dangers. However, desperate crime bosses, hindered by advanced tracking technology making it nearly impossible to dispose of bodies discreetly, resort to a dark solution. They send their targets back in time to 2044 using time travel. The victims are bound, bagged, and transported back to the past, where they meet their demise at the hands of hired contract killers, called loopers. The loopers then receive their payment in the form of silver bars, attached to the backs of the victims. However, there's a catch to being a looper. The strict regulations surrounding time travel mean that eventually, the crime bosses must terminate a looper's contract and erase all traces of their collaboration. When this happens, assuming the looper survives until 2074, they will be sent back in time to be executed by their younger selves, a process known as closing one's loop. This revelation is signaled by the presence of gold bars on the victim's back instead of silver. Once a looper successfully closes their loop, they are freed from their contract and given 30 years to live a comfortable life. Meet Joseph Joe Simmons, a 25-year-old looper working for a mafia company in Kansas City. Abe, his boss, was sent back from the future to oversee the loopers and also owns a club where Joe frequents and enjoys the company of Susie, a showgirl. To keep things interesting, Abe has hired additional muscle in the present day to maintain his criminal empire, known as the Gat Men, led by a man named Kid Blue. These Gat Men are named after their powerful Magnum revolvers, which outperform the loopers' close-range shotguns, called blunderbusses. During one night at the club, a fellow looper announces that he has successfully closed his loop, resulting in a substantial gold payoff and a cause for celebration. As Joe continues his work, he and the other loopers begin to notice a sudden rise in the frequency of loops being closed. The situation escalates when, one night, Seth, a fellow looper and Joe's friend, pays him an anxious visit. Seth confesses that he couldn't fulfill his duty to close his loop as expected because his older self, upon appearing, sang a song their mother used to sing to him as a baby. Unable to kill his older self, Seth learns from him that a formidable new crime boss known as the Rainmaker has risen in the future and is systematically closing all the loops. Before Seth can provide further details, the menacing Gat Men arrive at Joe's doorstep, prompting him to conceal Seth in a floor safe within his apartment. The Gat Men suspect Joe's involvement and take him to meet Abe, their boss. Abe strikes a deal with Joe. If he surrenders Seth, he will be set free. If not, they won't kill Joe due to potential future repercussions, but they will seize half of the silver Joe has saved for his retirement in France. Faced with this ultimatum, Joe reluctantly gives up Seth. Abe then suggests that Joe should flee to China instead of France, claiming to be from the future and advising that it's a better choice. With Seth handed over, Joe is released and treated to a lap dance with Susie while Abe orders Kid Blue to contact the doc for retribution against Seth. Meanwhile, old Seth experiences strange occurrences as he attempts to escape, with scars appearing on his arm, spelling out an address. Ignoring the message, his fingers start vanishing without any bloodshed, as if they were removed years ago. In a panic, he rushes to the address he was shown, but his body continues to deteriorate, losing his foot, then both legs, leaving him crawling to his destination. He desperately bangs on the door, but Kid Blue opens it and kills him upon arrival. Inside, we discover a horrifying sight. Young Seth is alive but undergoing a nightmarish operation, as his body parts are being systematically removed while he remains connected to a ventilator, ensuring his survival for the next 3 decades. Joe continues his killing spree, following each murder with a routine visit to a diner where he diligently studies French. At the diner, he encounters Beatrix, a waitress who serves him regularly. One day, while awaiting his next target, Joe is taken aback when the intended victim, who arrives late, turns out to be his own older self, identified as Old Joe. In a tense confrontation, young Joe attempts to shoot Old Joe, but deflected by a gold bar strapped to Old Joe's back. Old Joe then knocks out young Joe and leaves a note urging him to leave town. Despite the warning, young Joe returns to his apartment only to find Gatmen searching it and confiscating his possessions. A scuffle ensues, with young Joe managing to trap one of the Gatmen, Kid Blue, in a safe. However, during the altercation, young Joe is injured, falls from his fire escape, and loses consciousness. The movie then delves into the past to reveal old Joe's timeline. After closing his loop, he heeds Abe's advice and moves to Shanghai. Despite initially having considerable savings, old Joe squanders his money through excessive drug use and partying. Eventually, he turns to a life of crime as a contract killer for local gangs. Over the years, his appearance deteriorates and he loses most of his hair. In the year 2067, he meets a compassionate woman who helps him overcome his addictions. They marry, and life seems peaceful until 2074. Old Joe's tranquility is shattered when he is captured by armed men, believed to be associated with the Rainmaker, and forced to return to the time machine to close his loop. However, old Joe manages to overpower his captors, escape, and travel back in time. This time, the narrative shifts to old Joe's perspective, showing how he saves young Joe after knocking him unconscious. He then reads cryptic numbers at a library, only to receive a message from young Joe on his arm, directing him to meet at the diner. The two Joes meet at the diner and order the same meal. Old Joe cryptically addresses young Joe in French, revealing that he knows young Joe has a gun pointed at him under the table. While young Joe doesn't understand the message fully, old Joe assures him he will eventually. Old Joe reflects on the importance of learning the language, acknowledging its significance in their unfolding conflict. Old Joe shares with Joe further details about the enigmatic Rainmaker. This enigmatic figure seemingly emerged from nowhere, astonishingly seizing control of all major crime syndicates within a remarkably short span of 6 months. Known for orchestrating mass executions and purging vagrants, the Rainmaker also issued orders for the closure of all time loops, a move that significantly affected the lives of loopers like old Joe. Tragically, old Joe's life took a devastating turn when he was captured by the syndicate men, leading to the accidental death of his beloved wife at their hands. Determined to alter his past and prevent this heart-wrenching event, old Joe discovered a glimmer of hope before being sent back through time. His fellow looper colleague, Old Dale, handed him a numeric sequence that could potentially lead to uncovering the Rainmaker's identity. Old Joe knew that in Joe's present time, the Rainmaker to be, as a child, was residing in the same county. If old Joe could eliminate the Rainmaker in his formative years, he could avoid being captured and ultimately save his wife's life. However, information about the Rainmaker is shrouded in mystery, with only a few confirmed details available. It is said that he witnessed the brutal murder of his mother, an incident that left a profound mark on him. Additionally, rumors suggest that the Rainmaker might possess a synthetic jaw, adding to the air of uncertainty surrounding this elusive figure. As the conversation intensifies between old Joe and young Joe, it becomes evident that young Joe still harbors intentions of killing his elder self. Before either of them can react fully to the situation, they realize that the diner has inexplicably emptied out, with the staff and customers mysteriously disappearing, hinting at an impending attack. In a sudden and unexpected turn of events, a group of armed Gatmen storm into the diner, launching a surprise ambush on both Joes. Amidst the chaos and gunfire, old Joe manages to pass a fragment of a map with an address marked and a string of digits to young Joe. He suggests that this location could potentially lead to the whereabouts of the Rainmaker. As the violence escalates, old Joe makes a daring escape, while young Joe is left to fend off the Gatmen. Evading his assailants, young Joe decides to follow the coordinates on the map, leading him to a farmhouse occupied by Sarah and her young son, Sid Harrington. When young Joe presents the map to Sarah, she instantly recognizes the digits as Sid's birthday and the serial number of the hospital where he was born. This revelation prompts young Joe to open up about the entire situation concerning the Rainmaker. Much to young Joe's surprise, Sarah proves to be remarkably knowledgeable about loopers and their intricate workings. Old Joe, relying on a database of digits, discovers 3 potential children who were born on the same day in the same hospital. Unsettlingly, he intends to eliminate them. Sensing the danger, Sarah cautions Sid to steer clear of young Joe, but Sid's curiosity gets the better of him. He befriends young Joe and shares some of his electronics gear, impressing the man with his advanced skills despite being only 5 years old. Additionally, Sid was raised by Sarah's sister for 2 years until her untimely death, after which he believes Sarah to be his aunt, rejecting the notion that she is his real mother. This belief leads to Sid reacting aggressively towards Sarah, causing her to fear him, seeking refuge in her room and hiding in a safe when Sid becomes angry and accuses her of lying about her maternal relationship to him. In his pursuit of one of the possible Rainmaker children, old Joe finds the child attending a birthday party and tragically kills him. However, he soon realizes that his actions haven't altered his past, leading him to a breakdown in tears. It turns out he killed the wrong child. Undeterred, he sets out to find the other potential child, only to discover that the child lives with Susie, old Joe's former flame from 3 decades ago. This connection gives him pause, and he decides to observe their apartment instead of acting immediately. The next day, a member of the Gat Men named Jesse comes looking for Joe. Sid aids Joe in escaping from Jesse, who eventually departs. During their time in hiding, Joe shares his tumultuous past with Sid, recounting how his own mother gave him away to the panhandlers, resulting in him growing up without her care. He further reveals that she eventually sold him and was involved in drugs. This upbringing led Joe down a dark path, turning him into a killer, drug user, and ultimately, a looper. As young Joe and Sarah grow closer, he learns that she possesses telekinetic abilities greater than other individuals with similar powers. Jesse's suspicions of Sarah escalate, leading to his return to her residence, where he holds her at gunpoint just as Joe appears downstairs. Joe attempts to reason with Jesse, but the situation becomes even more precarious when Sid starts descending the stairs. Startled by Jesse's presence, Sid loses his balance and tumbles down the steps, triggering a fit of uncontrollable rage. In his anger, Sid unleashes an immense telekinetic blast, fatally injuring Jesse, and thereby coining the term Rainmaker as Jesse's blood seems to rain from his chest. This display of extraordinary telekinetic power confirms Joe's suspicion that Sid is indeed the Rainmaker, and that Sarah's sister met her end when Sid lost control of his abilities. Sarah emphasizes that Sid needs love and care, implying that being raised in a nurturing environment might prevent him from becoming the feared Rainmaker. Determined to help the young boy, Joe finds Sid weeping in the sugarcane fields and offers him comfort. Meanwhile, Kid Blue has successfully tracked down old Joe, locating him at Susie's apartment as he plans to eliminate the child. Just in time, young Joe warns Sarah and Sid to flee, fearing that his employers or old Joe might target their farm next. Old Joe manages to break free and engages in a deadly altercation with Abe and the other Gat Men, leaving Kid Blue wounded in the foot. As the two versions of Joe face off near Sarah's house, Kid Blue intervenes and ultimately dispatched by young Joe's blunderbuss. Sarah and Sid try to escape in a truck, but old Joe relentlessly pursues them, leading Sarah to accelerate in an attempt to run him over. In a moment of fear, Sid employs his telekinetic abilities to flip the truck. Seeking refuge in the sugarcane fields, Sid and Sarah are still pursued by old Joe, who fires shots at them. Sid, now grazed by a bullet, succumbs to another fit of rage, using his TK powers to suspend Sarah and old Joe in midair. Young Joe has been trailing old Joe in his truck, but a TK blast causes the truck to overturn. Sid, in the midst of a tantrum, is comforted by Sarah, who reassures him of her love. As a result, Sid regains control of his TK powers and calls Sarah Mom for the first time, showing Joe that Sid can be calmed. Old Joe, recovering from the blast, reaches for his gun intending to shoot Sid. Acting quickly, Sarah sends Sid into the cane fields and uses herself as a shield to protect him from old Joe's gunfire. In a moment of realization, young Joe experiences a time flash, understanding that the cycle of revenge is an endless loop. He envisions old Joe shooting Sarah, and Sid losing his mother's love, becoming the embittered Rainmaker. Understanding that killing old Joe won't end the cycle, young Joe makes a bold decision. He points his blunderbuss at himself and shoots, effectively closing the loop from his end. Instantly, old Joe vanishes. Sarah lovingly tends to Sid's injuries and puts him to bed. She then discovers gold bars scattered around the overturned truck, which old Joe had stolen from Abe's headquarters. With this newfound wealth, Sarah and Sid will be well provided for. She walks over to young Joe's lifeless body in the field and gently strokes his hair, something he had shared with Susie that his own mother used to do for him. And that's the end of the story. I hope you liked it. Comment down below what movies do you like us to recap next. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.